Hello, welcome back to our English unit. We're going to be carrying on planning for your suspense story today, and we're going to be thinking about designing the setting. Now, quick apologies, the pen tool I normally use to write on the slides I've left at school, so I'm going to be doing it slightly differently today. I'm going to be typing as I go, and it's going to look a little bit strange, but I think I've got a way around it. Okay, so let's make that a little bit smaller. Now, as I said, we're going to be looking at designing a setting today. We're going to be looking at the settings used in the two stories we've read so far. We're also going to be looking at a story that I know you did in Year 5. We're going to look at what makes an effective setting for a suspense story, typical settings that are used in a suspense story, ideas for your suspense story, and then you're going to have a chance to choose and design the setting of your story. And yes, I'm aware I said story quite a lot in the past few sentences. Now, you may already have ideas about what you're going to do, and that's great. Perfect. You may not, and that's fine too. By the end of the lesson today, you will hopefully have an idea, and if not, I'll help choose one for you. Okay, so what is a setting? Well, a setting is where the majority of your story will take place. If you think about the Curse of Cogston House, the majority of it happens in the house. The Water Tower, the majority of it happens at the Water Tower. With a suspense story, the setting has to make sense. And it has to be somewhere where scary things could happen. Reasonably. So for example, you couldn't have a unicorn garden. That's not going to be a great setting for your suspense story, because it's unlikely that anything scary will happen there. Unless you get trampled on by unicorns, of course. Now, settings you have come across before that are used in suspense. Well, this year we have shown you the Water Tower, and we've also shown you the Curse of Cogston House. Both of those have settings that are linked to suspense. With the Water Tower, we have the Water Tower and the town of Preston, which is a very quiet town in the desert. Bit weird. Curse of Cogston House obviously is set in an old abandoned house, possibly haunted, a bit creepy. And then what you looked at in Year 5, and I know you did a unit on this, was Alma. And Alma is set in a doll shop of sorts, and I know that from looking on Seesaw, some of you have thought about doing a story based in a shop of some kind, and that's absolutely fine. So let's have a look at the settings in detail. So here is the first setting, the Water Tower. What I want you to do is to have a think about, I'm just going to close my email so they stop popping up over my face. I want you to have a think about, please, some of these questions for this particular setting. So, is it abandoned? What can you hear? How does the setting link to what happens to the characters? What might you see? This is the key question. What is the backstory to the setting? And I'll talk about why that's key in a second. And what might you find here? So have a little think about that. Okay, so if we're thinking about the Water Tower, is it abandoned? Well, yes. What can you hear? Possibly the rusting of the pipes, the groaning of the metal, the water sloshing about on the inside. How does the setting link to what happens to the characters? Well, the main bad thing that we think happens to Bubba is caused by something from within the Water Tower. So that is how the setting links to the plot and what happens to the character. So whatever setting you pick can't just be random. The thing that happens to your character needs to be linked to your setting. So, if you're going to have, I don't know, let's say you're going to pick an abandoned fairground. Whatever's going to happen to your character has got to be linked to the fairground. You wouldn't, for example, have, if you're doing a fairground, you probably wouldn't have some kind of monster, because there's a better setting you could pick to use a monster in. A water tower is perfect to have a monster inside it. A fairground, not so much. There are other options. What might you find here? Well, lots of water, rust, the weird symbol. What is the backstory to the setting? Now, the backstory to the setting is what has happened before to make that setting a bit spooky. And I'm going to talk to you more about that when we get onto the Curse of Cogston House, because a water tower on its own is not spooky. A water tower, we've got one in Stevenage near Giles on Varden Road. It's not spooky, it's just a water tower. What makes a setting spooky is what's happened there before and its appearance. So if we look at the Curse of Cogston House, well, what's the backstory? Well, the backstory to the Curse of Cogston House is what happened to the two girls who went in there and were never seen again. What makes the Curse of Cogston House spooky? Well, the way it's described, the way it looks, but most importantly, the fact that the two girls went missing inside it. Otherwise, it's just an abandoned house. Isn't necessarily spooky. We look at Alma. Again, is it abandoned? Well, there's no one. We don't see anyone in there. What can you hear? The weird creaks. Are people allowed to go there? Well, technically, yes, but I would suggest people don't because of the fact it's so empty. What might you find here? Lots of dolls, dust in the windows. And that again might suggest that it's abandoned because of the dust. How does the setting link to what happens to the character? Well, it's a doll shop, and because it's a doll shop, she becomes a doll. Makes sense. You wouldn't have her becoming a doll if you were setting your story in an abandoned warehouse, for example. Or, that it has to make sense, whatever you want to do. What might you see? The dolls. Now, the backstory for the setting, if you remember the video, and I'm going back a bit, you're going to have to cast your mind back. There is a backstory, and we don't see it, but we know this has happened to children before, because on the wall opposite the shop are lots of missing posters, and they're missing posters of all of the children that have gone missing before. That suggests to us that something creepy has happened here. Otherwise, it's just a shop. By showing us those missing posters, we realise something sinister's going on. So you need to think about what's happened before in your setting that's going to make it more creepy. Okay, so what makes a suitable setting for suspense? Because you can't just pick anything, you've got to pick one that has the potential to be scary. So you need, as I said, a backstory where something scary has happened before, or something sinister, or something a bit weird. Somewhere where people aren't allowed to go is normally good, or shouldn't go there at the time your characters are there. Or maybe it's just somewhere that people don't go. Even if they're allowed to go there, like the shop in Alma, they just choose not to, for whatever reason. If you've got a place with loads of people all bustling about and happy, that's not going to make it seem very scary. Often they're abandoned, or so it seems. And again, an abandoned place or a derelict, which means ruined place, is good. Okay, so this is an example of a setting description that has been used in a completely different story, one you won't have come across before. So the house was shrouded in a pale mist which leaked from its cracked panels and splintered beams. With every crowd of swirling vapour, the house seemed to be breathing deeply, like a dragon with smoking nostrils. Outside, clumps of rotten leaves clung to the base of the house, and a few clawed hands scraped out of the dirt and up the wall. Above the door, 3 pumpkins watched menacingly, their eyes aglow, and they laughed at a mechanical, high-pitched cackle. I'm not going to read it all, but just from that bit there you can see some of the description that's used to make a house seem more spooky. Now, I'm going to show you the start of this video because it's a really good little suspense video. It's called Raphael. I will post the link on the activity for Seesaw, so if you want to watch the whole thing, you can do. I would recommend it, but I'm not going to do it in the video today because that's not what we're focusing on. So I'm just going to show you the start of it. Get my internet page up. So straight away we've got a castle, but the sun is setting. It's happening at night. Makes it more creepy. It's a castle. Quite creepy in itself, but particularly with the candles. And then suddenly we've got a place he shouldn't go, but the key's been left in it. Once again, somewhere he shouldn't go is the setting. He knows he shouldn't go in there, like the characters in the stories we've read, but he's gonna go in there anyway. Okay, so we've got the setting here. A room full of wonderful things, but look in the background. There's a warning. Look at the pictures. They've chosen to include in their setting other weird and wonderful things. Okay, as I say, I'm going to post the link on Seesaw. Please go and watch it. It is really good, but I'm not going to sort of sit through it here. The setting that they have chosen is a room within a castle, some sort of study or office full of magical and weird items. It has the potential to be spooky. It's not a magical unicorn garden. And that's the point. All good suspense stories pick a setting that makes sense. Again, video link will be in the Seesaw description. Okay, so here's some other setting ideas that you could use for yours in case you haven't got one yet. So you could have an attic of sorts with a lonely chair in it. A classroom, maybe in an abandoned school. Abandoned schools are good settings. You can do a lot of fun with those. A forest at night. Typical suspense story setting. Weird eyes glowing. A graveyard. Again, classic for a suspense story. Easy to work in, lots of scary moments. A never-ending tunnel, a long dark tunnel, maybe an underground tube station or a train station that's been abandoned. Basically anywhere that's been abandoned. Other places I can think of, fairgrounds, abandoned power plants, an abandoned shop, a shop at night. You could have, I don't know, your school, but at night time. You could have, there's so many different places. You could imagine, again, you could have a doll shop like Alma. It's entirely up to you, but pick a setting that makes sense and something where you could be scary. Okay, so if you're not sure for your setting, scroll back through the video. Now what you're going to be doing today is you're going to choose your setting and you're going to fill in the sheet here. And again, this will be on Seesaw. And these are some of the questions you need to think about. What is the backstory for your setting? What has happened before? So what scary event has happened here before that makes your setting more scary, I suppose? Some of the senses. What could you see? What will you hear? What might you smell? What might be there to touch? Obviously, you're going to put where or what your setting is. School, graveyard, abandoned house, fairground, water tower, doll shop, whatever you want to do. Are people normally allowed there? Yes or no? If no, why not? What makes your setting suitable for suspense? So what about your setting is good for a suspense story? Maybe because it's abandoned. Maybe because people haven't been there for ages. Maybe it allows you to introduce a scary character later on. Okay, what about your setting is good for your story? Right, you've written about your characters. How are your characters going to be linked to the setting? You need to think about that. If it's an abandoned school, easy. They're children, maybe it's their old school. Maybe it's their old primary school, for example, that's now been abandoned. If it's a abandoned fairground, how are they linked to it? Is it somewhere they used to go when they were younger that is, again, now been abandoned, so they want to go back there? If you're doing a doll shop or any shop, is it in their local town centre? Or is it in a street that they accidentally wander through on their way to school, for example? You need to think about why your characters would be where you say they're going to be. It's not just, oh, Timmy and Timmy and Jess, that's their names now. Timmy and Jess went to the abandoned nuclear power plant. That's nice, but why? It makes no sense. There needs to be a reason. Describe the state of your setting. Is it abandoned, derelict, or is it brand new? Most of them will be derelict, which means sort of run down and ruined, or abandoned. What could you mention to make your setting seem scary? Has it got a particular feature? Has it got, I don't know, has it got something growing on the walls? Has part of it been broken? Has there been a fence put up or a sign warning people not to go inside? Something like that. What are the different parts of your setting? Does it have different rooms, places, levels, or buildings? If you're doing it in an abandoned school, you need to focus on, for example, they might go into the dining room and they might go into a classroom. You need to focus on the different bits, not just a merry wander around the corridors. Okay? That's the sheet you need to do. It'll be on Seesaw for you. I've left the boxes blank, so you should be able to do the little typing bit you can do on Seesaw, like I know all of you can do by now, and pop that in there. Okay? I look forward to seeing what your settings are going to be. Thank you very much for listening. Raphael, the video that I showed you a bit of, will be on the Seesaw link. For now, goodbye.